Max Keiser is our guest.
There must be some kind of way out of here.
I want him to finish up his point, and we're going to go to your phone calls. You can comment on it all. Very well read verse, young man. I can't get no relief.
I can't get no relief.
Max Keiser, there's got to be some way out of here. You know, just in case listeners think you were joking about gulag casinos, I was listening to Fox News Radio here locally on 590 AM this week and heard that announced. I went home and Googled it. And sure enough, we had it linked up on Infowars.com. But here's Times of London. Vladimir Putin, gambling law, banishes Russian casinos to Siberian exile. And then earlier I mentioned how in China they CPS people's kids and put them up for adoption. But they won't tell you that here. They steal the kids and put them up for adoption. They get like $500,000 for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby. I've had senators on admitting they have bounties out for your kids in the public schools. Sometimes they sell them to foreign countries. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest purchasers. But see, BBC, China, babies sold for adoption. It says they seize your kid if you've had more than one child and sell it to people, I guess, have been sterilized by the drinking water here in the U.S. But going back to Max Keiser, so the casino gulag economy, you did say like 6 months ago on my show that we were going to go to this, and you were serious. So finish your point on that. Any other big, important items and big shoes to drop in the economy? Then I want to start going to these phones here.
Right. Yeah, the casino gulag model is what I've been talking about for a while. And as the economy continues to implode, it'll become a standing policy. And my prediction for 2009, one of my big predictions, is that online gambling is going to be legalized in the U.S. because this is going to be billed as a way to stimulate the economy. And this will just further atrophy and carve out the equity of the U.S. Now, during the news break, it was funny because the newscaster said that Joe Biden said that Obama miscalculated what the effect of the first stimulus package might be, and now they're thinking about a second stimulus.
You've been saying that. It's just like a heroin dealer. Oh, you just need one more shot and it'll be okay.
Yeah, and I think it's what people should understand what this means, and just to spend maybe 30 seconds reviewing some of the big points.
No, take your time. Go over it. Go ahead.
Let's talk about the banking system for a while in context here. The banking system, traditionally, if you put $1,000 in the bank will then lend out $1,000. The idea of a fractional reserve banking system is you put $1,000 in the bank, and the bank lends out $10,000. Well, where do they get that additional $9,000? It's loaned into existence. And this is how the money, what's called money, expands, but it's actually, these are just IOUs. These are just debts that are being created by banks, and they do it purely in their own service. And the interest on the debt, of course, will always eclipse any kind of return they're getting on the deposit. So you end up with an economy that's heading further and further into debt. Now, what we've seen in the last...
Well, hey, let's not just glaze over that. Explain to people, this is a singularity financially, like a black hole. It's designed to put you into debt. It's designed to create more debt than actual asset.
That's right. The interest on America's debt now, I think it's the third biggest item on the budget behind Social Security and the military. Then comes debt interest.
And so soon it'll be like California where everything goes to debt and literally the police just go around holding you up by your ankles, shaking the change out of your pocket. How long till we reach that point?
Right. That number one for debt interest payment at the current rate. I haven't done the numbers in terms of picking the exact month or when that's going to be, but at its current rate, clearly it'll be the number one item. But just to point out something which is the next level when over the past 10 to 15 years, well, the reason you have this huge crisis on Wall Street really starting in the summer of 2007 is that fractional reserve model moved into something that I would call the zero reserve model. And in the zero reserve model, what happens is you put $1,000 in the bank, then a bank like Goldman Sachs will sell that $1,000 deposit to another bank for a fee, and they'll still make that $10,000 in loans. So they're making $10,000 in loans now based on having no reserves at all. And that's how they can make these astronomical rates of returns, is because they actually have no reserves. The banking system, in a zero-reserve system, you have to think of it as a banking hologram. These simply swapping back and forth pieces of paper that they say represent some value, but in fact there's no value at all. And I think this goes back to something we saw a couple of weeks ago, which is a story that was big for only about 6 hours, which was that $134 billion in notes that were trying to be crossed from Italy into Switzerland. And there was a big story that broke, and people were trying to figure out what is the deal with this $134 billion in U.S. Treasury securities that are trying to be smuggled into Switzerland. And my take on what that was all about is that in Switzerland, of course, you have the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks. And every quarter, when these banks have to report the assets on their books, because they don't really have assets on their books to report, which is one reason why auditing the Fed would expose the Fed as being having no assets at all. The reason why at the end of the quarter they have to do an actual accounting, they engage in what I call peekaboo accounting, where banks swap these worthless the pieces of paper that they can claim do have value, they swap it back and forth.
So they're all swapping it. There's like a limited pile, and they all move it around during the accounting.
Exactly, and that's what I think that was all about. It was as part of this global, scheme, really, in the central banks, where they're all basically cooperating to misrepresent the assets on the books.
But here's the bad part. It's like musical chairs. They all get a chair, the big banks do. They get the golf courses and movie companies and factories. We, the people, don't get a chair.
Right. This is what happened in the summer of 2007. The music stopped, and even Chuck Prince, who was the CEO of Citibank at the time, he said, you know what, as long as the music still plays, we're going to keep dancing. And it was at that month, almost to that day, when the music stopped. A couple of hedge funds at Bear Stearns blew up, and the music stopped, and suddenly there were no more suckers coming into the market. The Bernie Madoff thing blew up because of the same reasons, because there was no fresh money coming into the Ponzi scheme. And it became this huge what I call a controlled demolition, because obviously if the bankers on Wall Street, including Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, even in 2009 are scheduled to pay themselves record bonuses, it's clear that they are not participating in any way in this financial catastrophe. And it's also clear that they have the means to create the financial catastrophe, and it's also clear that at this point that based on Paulson's testimony to Congress and what Tim Geithner has done and Bernanke has done, that this was in fact a premeditated, controlled financial demolition. And I don't see how anyone can have any other conclusion than that.
But they like that because now they get to play the savior again and consolidate even more power and have bailout after bailout directly to themselves, never sending one dime of our own money back into the economy. I want to go to calls now, but one last point. Madoff, it came out in AP, as you know, that it was $171 billion in assets, so that's the asset forfeiture seizure notice. I thought it was $50 billion. I mean, certainly Madoff wasn't acting alone.
Well, this is, again, it gets back to peekaboo accounting. It depends what week you look at the books. One week it's $50 billion, and next week it could be $170 billion. In other words, it's all fictitious accounting. It's all accounting fraud.
Is someone robbing your car out there?
Well, I'm on Paris, and that's somebody's car is out there squeaking. Yes.
Sure, it's a wonderful third world person bashing the windows out. We've got to give him some welfare. Okay.
It's off now.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I interrupted because of the car alarm. Okay, so that's the peekaboo accounting. But certainly Madoff didn't act alone.
Well, Madoff is, when I was working on Wall Street, there's a concept called parking stock. And parking stock or a busted trade or an error account, the way it works is, at the end of the day, a lot of times you would have bought or sold more stock than you made a mistake, you made an error, and you have at the firm what's called an error account. And you park that stock in the error account overnight, and then the next day when you come in, you try to place it somewhere. And whether it's long-term capital management or it's Bernie Madoff's fund, these guys are used to stash errors by large traders who need to play this peekaboo game on a short-term basis.
And so that's why he's being left alone. They're saying he acted alone.
Well, the system, the entire...
Got a break. I promise, folks, we're going to your calls. This is just too important with Max Keiser.